Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Little Red Rooster Summer Showcase. Thanks, Vic, for hosting us. And this panel event, which is titled Communicating Sustainability, where we're going to be delving into the way that brands navigate their environmental efforts and how they talk about it. Over the past few years, we've seen a lot of brands talk about sustainability, some in the right way and some in often misleading ways. So I think today we are really going to delve into what's good and what's bad and how brands can better report and communicate depending on whatever stage they're at on their sustainable journey. Just to introduce myself, I'm Roddy Clark, a design writer, speaker and consultant, and I focus a lot of my work on the positive social and environmental impacts that design can have. I've got a background in restoration, and I look at how craft can really sort of draw us back into circular methods and its kind of place and relevance in today's contemporary design world. And I'm super excited to be joined by an amazing panel of guests. We've got Charlotte Metcalf, the associate editor at Country and Townhouse magazine, the co-host of Breakout Culture podcast, and editor of Great British Brands. We've got Magnus Weiberg, the co-founder of Transparent. We've got Anna Batten, the SDA product manager at SMEG. We've got Aaron Yan, the marketing communications lead at Framery Acoustics, and sustainability journalist Emma Henderson, and of course, Little Red Rooster's very own Vic Ruffy. So yeah, thank you. I think coming to you first, actually, Vic, it would be great to start the session talking about your recent journey coming to the B Corp certification and how that was for you. You mentioned when we spoke the other day that whilst it allowed you to really delve into sort of every area of the business, it also highlighted things that you were already doing, but you just weren't talking about them. So can you explain more about the process and how that was for you?
Yeah, so we started off when a few years ago, we started with the kind of internal initiative of just, we used to call it doing good, which sounds really kind of basic, but it was just, is this the best way we could do this? Really basic. And then I heard a lot more about B Corp, like a couple of PR agencies got accredited, and I was like, oh, I wonder how hard that would be. And I guess because we're a service-based company, I was a bit nervous that maybe it wasn't for us, that it's really focused more on manufacturers. But actually, the more I looked into it, I was like, yeah, we're going to give this a go. So it took 2 years from first application until we were accredited. And like, you know, the journey, but the journey was like really incredible because one, we were already doing so many things that, you know, we are a PR agency, and it was incredible how bad we were at communicating internally on what we were doing. So that was really good. It enabled us to focus on sharing what we're doing and making sure if we're making things available for our team that they know about it. Because like everyone, you're so busy doing your actual business, your actual job, that you forget to kind of focus on the other things. So that has been really, really good. And, you know, it's just been like really uniting on so many levels. Like the team are really galvanized by it. I'm hugely galvanized by it. And I think like the reaction from clients has been super positive as well, because when you look to work with a partner in any format, you want to make sure that you're partnering with people who are like just doing things, you know, doing good, doing the right thing. So yeah, it's been really cool.
And do you feel it holds you to account? Because you say you have to report back every 3 years. Is it holding you account on a daily basis? And how is that sort of implemented with the team as well on a daily basis?
So all the reports are like available on the B Corp website. Our scores on there. We actually produced a booklet that we've given out to all our clients, and there's some copies downstairs. So our intention is that we're going to report on it annually, even though we're only assessed every 3 years. There are many aspects to it that, you know, I guess encourage you to keep looking. So we've one of the areas that we performed really well on was kind of an accident. So one of the consultants that was scoring us said to us, you know, you've really done well on your local economic impact, which I had no idea we were doing well on that. And then when I delved into it, it was because we're based near London. So I could have taken the win and said, gosh, we've done so well on our local economic impact. But then I thought, I don't want to be a fraud. And I get the fear a lot. So now we've gone a bit further and said we're going to really focus on the immediate local economic impact. So that's people within 15 miles. So now we really encourage applications for people from jobs who are really close. We incentivize people who walk to work. We incentivize people who take public transport to work. So yeah, it's been cool.
It's really interesting to hear, and hopefully it'll encourage other people to kind of embark on that journey, because I think one of the things that will come up later in the conversation around certifications is, working with independent parties who are doing this in-depth analysis of you really does hold you to account. And I think that is, one of the ways that we can all improve as companies, as brands, as designers, is someone else holding us to account, which is, really effective in creating change.
It gives you framework, which I think is important, because sometimes you think, oh, I'll do that one thing, that's cool. I'll do that one thing, that's cool. And it gives you a framework to put it all together. And that's the thing that I found really helpful about B Corp.
Amazing, thank you. And Magnus, coming to you. Obviously, you're doing amazing things in the world of home tech. The work at Transparent, the way that you're changing the game in terms of its repairability and the component-driven design that you offer. Can you explain more about your offering and how that journey from the outset of the business has been sort of the core inherent principle of what you do?
Thank you. So I think for us, it's so natural. We come from a modular approach from the beginning. When we founded the company 10 years back, we wanted to create audio objects that blends into any sort of environment. But we also need to build it in a modular way. Creating an audio brand probably takes 30, 40 years, and we have come a very short journey in our way of, working. But it also gives us an opportunity. The opportunity is that we come from modularity in the beginning. And when I say modular, I mean that we don't glue anything together except for PCB level. So everything can be upgradable and repaired. And that gives us a huge advantage, I feel, at least in our communication. And the communication around us is that we also have started to reduce a lot of our adjectives. So some adjectives are there, sort of like cool, fantastic, Erasmus English, almost. And they can be a bit frustrating to use them. So I want to have a more neutral approach when we're talking about, our goals or our visions or how we are working. And we have actually removed sustainability in our way of talking internally and externally. So we use circularity because it makes more sense for what we are doing and what we want to change.
That's really interesting. I mean, the word itself has become tainted with so many misconceptions. Greenwashing has ruined the word, essentially. And even, as a sustainability journalist, you'll know this, Emma, talking about it, I try and avoid using the word and replacing it with, similar words like that. But I asked you earlier, actually, about whether customers come to you for aesthetic purposes or for, the modular system that you offer. And you were like, no, they come to us for the aesthetic. And you were so definite about that. And from a company that has circularity at its core, but your aesthetic is what sells the product, how do you communicate that? And I mean, looking on your website, it is amazing how you categorize the carbon footprint of every single product. You clearly state it with visual diagrams. And so your communication is very effective in my perception. But it'd be really sort of interesting to hear how that journey has been for you.
We have learned so much so we did a LCA, life cycle analysis, together with a third-party company. And I think I want to emphasize how important it is to bring in a third party. Even if we contracted them, they had NDAs with all our suppliers. We took no part, basically, in the evaluation of our carbon footprint. And when we're reading through that, I mean, it's also our small transparent speaker is equal to producing 498 avocados. So I think it's also setting carbon footprint in relation to something people can understand or relate to, because even I have hard to understand carbon footprint as a measurement. And I don't think carbon footprint is the only way of looking at it, but I think it at least is a tool right now to use. The carbon footprint generator, we want to show how upgrades can benefit both the planet but also people's wallets over time. So it's two aspects that we are looking into when we're doing
Which
that.
Again is one of the biggest challenges I see in the world of sustainability and design, is making products affordable, and that's what you're doing in bringing that affordability aspect in through minor upgrades rather than replacements is absolutely key. And it's really interesting that you talk about the third party, again, reiterating the point that third-party independent testing is crucial to communication. Anna, it would be great to come to you to talk about the recent work that you've done at SMEG and kind of what you're doing, implementing in terms of sustainability schemes and methods into the products that you create.
So we've currently done an overhaul on some of our SDA products. As we know, plastics is obviously a bad topic that most people don't want to touch on. And we have quite a lot of plastic components included in our SDAs. So we've been looking at how we can include recycled content to make them more environmentally friendly. Also using things deliberately like steel and glass in terms of our MDA appliances, where they can be used where it can be more recycled moving forward. Also touching on obviously being a bit more modular in terms of how things are manufactured. So obviously our products do need to be repaired and maintained, and making sure that that is as easy as it can be as possible to help protect that longevity. And then looking at like packaging, so making sure that we're using things and eliminating plastic as and where possible, but obviously testing goes alongside that to make sure that it does work and help protect the products, so we're not having an influx of products that turn up with marks or damages where they would then need to be returned and recycled as well.
And in terms of repairs, I think in your world that's quite a key factor in terms of encouraging circularity. Mm-hmm. Is that something you'll be building more into the business as time goes on in terms of a repair scheme or a take-back scheme maybe?
So we are looking at how we can do that and how we can facilitate that. Currently with products that come in that we can't necessarily repair ourselves, or it doesn't work out to be financially viable to do the repair, we do provide an uplift, and that product goes back to our warehouse, and then we pass that product on to a third party, which would then look to either repair or sell that as a refurbished product. So we do try and be as circular as we can be, but there are obviously improvements that we can all make to try and make that more accessible, and obviously to try and bring that also in-house, so we don't have to put that through a third party rather than doing it ourselves.
Amazing. And in terms of communication, you released a sustainability report, I think in 2021, and you've got a green pledge as a company. Can you explain more how you approached the communication of what you're doing as a company, and in releasing these reports, how the experience was for you?
So obviously, as you guys mentioned, using third party is kind of like vital, especially to make sure that there's transparency, which is really key to us at SMEG, and we want to make sure that we're as transparent as we possibly can be. So when we wanted to create our first sustainability report, which got published into 2021, we wanted to try and do this to take stock of the actions that we'd already taken place, and also to highlight any areas that we really want to focus on moving forward. So we did this in accordance with the global reporting trade standards. So it just makes sure that it keeps us accountable, and also it's trying to make sure that we're giving a clear message through to our customers and how that's portrayed to them. Also, we all know, obviously climate change is a big thing for us, and we have been documenting internally our carbon footprint, and we're going to be over the next couple of months outlining what our carbon pledges will be moving forward in order to reduce our CO2 emissions.
Amazing, very interesting. We look forward to hearing more in the future on that. Aaron, coming to you, different sector of the design world completely.
Sure.
It would be great if you can introduce Framery to the audience actually, and kind of talk about more how sustainability is an inherent part of what you do, but as market leaders within the sector, how do you tackle that and kind of take on the responsibility of setting the tone for the industry?
Yeah, it's a super interesting question, because in a way we have introduced a completely new product category into the market about 12, 13 years ago. There were no pods in the market. The product didn't exist, and we kind of had to create the market. Now, looking at the global landscape, we have about 200 competitors globally. But because we were first, we kind of had to figure out how to develop the product throughout. And that also means that these companies that have been popping out throughout look to us, okay, what is Framery doing in terms of how are they designing their doors, their acoustics, their ventilation, but also how are they talking about the pods, and specifically sustainability. And for me, who I'm coming from this from a communication point of view first, sustainability second, there's a special kind of responsibility we have when we talk about Framery and when we talk about sustainability, that it's not just about us. We need to keep in mind that we have circa 200 other companies out there, and when we make pledges or when we do something ambitious, we need to make sure that we walk a fine line by still being transparent enough and also set standards in terms of attaching the claims that we make. So for instance, we say that we make the world's most sustainable pod, but that also comes with the responsibility of breaking that pod down. What are the materials we use? How is our value chain looking like? These kind of things.
Amazing. And as a sort of a business that is really sort of trying to grow commercially, how do you balance your commercial growth whilst trying to reduce your environmental footprint?
Yeah, it's super interesting because we're looking to grow. I mean, it's no secret that the pods market is exploding all over the world, and we want to obviously explode with it. So we are looking to sell way more products, but at the same time, we're trying to decarbonize. And the only way I can think of this, and the way we think about this in Framery as well, is it's quite simple. You have to realize that decarbonization, there's a business case in it. If you try to skate around it, try to cut corners today, and perhaps save a bit of money, you're going to lose out in the long term. So there's a financial incentive there to decarbonize, and that means preparing your value chains so that you get the raw materials sustainably, but also basically your PR image as well. So you're building for the future.
And in terms of recent innovation, I think you've got your latest products downstairs. Could you explain more on that actually to the audience, because it is sort of changing the game again of the industry and kind of bringing a new angle?
Yeah, I can begin from sort of the top level. So for us, it's twofold when we think about sustainability. It's both about making the product as sustainable as possible, and then there are new business practices. And you were touching on this earlier a bit as well, about being able to repair the product, being able to recycle certain parts of it. We have a few years ago we introduced Framery Subscribed because we realize we make a product that lasts. It can be disassembled, assembled again countless times, and used by different offices, different users. So that's how we introduce a sustainability through different business practices or different basically ways of engaging with our customers. Then on the product level, for instance, now we have Framery Contact downstairs, and the whole idea of it is that we can start having face-to-face interactions like we're having all of us in this room, but doing it remotely. And then that has secondary effects on business travel, which is one of the worst things in terms of your environmental footprint when it comes to sort of secondary emissions. And yeah, just a flight from New York to London, that's the same amount of carbon than a pod downstairs. So different ways of looking at it is important.
Amazing. And it's all about constant innovation and thinking about change and never being stuck in one position. Because that's when as I say, when it comes to sustainability, it's an evolving subject, an evolving topic. We're learning every single day, every single week. Charlotte, coming to you. It would be great to actually gain more of an insight into the work that you do with Great British Brands, but also with the Great British Brand Zero, which was a special green edition for COP26 in 2021. But also your kind of general views as to the communication that you see from brands around sustainability.
Well, first of all, thank you for having us. I mean, what's so great about this, or us all being here talking about this, is 2 years ago this would not be happening. Because when I decided to put the idea of doing a special edition of Great British Brands for COP26 2 years ago, nobody would talk to me. And bear in mind, we're dealing with the luxury industry. And bear in mind, this was when Burberry had been hauled over the coals for burning all their stock, and, you know, fast fashion was a filthy word. And nobody would talk to me. I mean, they all went, and there's no way we're going to put our heads over the parapet because we're not doing enough. And you were talking about the fear. And we're now a B Corp 2, Country and Townhouse. We got our accreditation a week ago, so that's all good, yeah. But the fear around it was so extraordinary 2 years ago. Nobody would discuss it, and to persuade everybody, I mean, it ruined my summer because I was just, please talk to me. And of course, it was the best thing we ever did because everybody realized that everybody was scared. Nobody knew what they were doing. Nobody had the answers, but hey, we're all in it together. And as soon it was that coming out of isolation, I think we really kind of broached a wall. And then since then, we've been asked to do so many events like this, you know, to get people to have an opportunity to talk about it. How do you become a B Corp? how do you do that? There's a wonderful thing called Green Salon that's now set up as an advisory that helps brands step by step, sort of holds their hand through the processes and all that kind of thing. So much has changed, but obviously there's still a lot to do, and brands are still communicating appallingly a lot of the time, and you know, there's still banging on about planting trees as if that's a kind of be all and end all answer, and it isn't. You know, it's much tougher and harder than that, and we all have got to do it, because if we don't do it, as somebody was saying, you know, it is a business imperative. You will lose your customers, and it is really interesting how customers are, especially more around fashion things, are demanding that now. And the other interesting thing about branding was, I think, you know, and just going back to your point about plastic, you know, Smeg's being very honest, saying where and when we can get rid of plastic. So if you talk to Sian Sutherland, who's got a Plastic Planet, the issue is you know, it's huge, and her view is that unless we get governments to mandate against plastic, it's too big. It's just, you know, it's so hard to build anything without it. So there's a lot to be done, and for a brand to be saying we're getting rid of plastic, it's kind of not realistic. It's much better to say it like you did.
Oh, no, it is. Also, it's such a big, it is a big ask, being totally honest with you. Like, you could obviously change some of your plastic elements to glass, but then you've also got an issue with damages and how that is also then packaged, and then it also affects the changes that you've probably already made. So you might have to go back to things like, not that we ever would, but back to things like polystyrene, where you are giving a proper protection of the product and you're not going to get those damages moving in. But it's a lot easier to think to get rid of plastic, as in we all want to make smart changes. We all, well, I bring my metal water bottle with me absolutely everywhere, and I'll refill it as and when I can, as opposed to buying plastic bottles. But to actually make those changes and try and make those changes as a positive change, it is hard. It is hard.
And I think just on the fear front again, you know, we had a wonderful essay by Clover. And now, of course, I've completely forgotten it. Clover Hogan, I think, who wrote about ecophobia, which is, you know, such a big thing. People are so, what can I do? What can I do? It's too big. It's too big a problem. And I think we are getting through that now, because I think everybody is realising that we can't do everything all at once. We just got to do what we can. Just one other small point about branding that's very interesting. You know, I think it was you saying that you're a brand first, and then you put this, you know, your branding comes before you're talking about your sustainability. Somebody was saying that, and I think that's very interesting, because I just was at the Rolls-Royce have just launched their first electric car, and their big message was, it's a Rolls-Royce first, it's electric second, which I think is really interesting. It's almost as if now, instead of bleating on about sustainability, it should be a given that that's what you're doing. You shouldn't have to be banging on about it. You are sustainable and you are making electric cars, but you are first and foremost Rolls-Royce.
I want to react to that, because I was saying me personally, but I agree with the point, because you make a really important point. I think the reason why a lot of years now ago that Teslas became so popular, and forget about Elon Musk for a second, right? It wasn't because everyone wanted to save the planet. It was because the brand was cool. I remember us in university studying Tesla, not just because sustainability, it was because it was a cool brand. I remember working with agencies, and working in an agency, we were looking at Tesla because it was a cool brand. So we need to make sustainability cool as well. There's a very powerful incentive when it comes to conformity. We need to be able to tap into that kind of social psychology as well, to force our competitors and to force basically our consumers as well to make the right choice. So I don't think as a company, but also as media, as any stakeholder, we shouldn't shy away from that, to use those kind of tools that are at our disposal. Because yes, we care about the environment to some degree, all of us, but we also care about fitting in. Let's tap into that.
I think it's really interesting, because it's sustainability, and our progress in sustainability is not a linear trajectory. Like, we're not gonna, you know, we solve one issue and we unearth 10 others at the same time. And I think it's so powerful when brands own that fact and they own that they're on a journey and they're not perfect. There's another writer that talks about being imperfectly perfect, and it's better that everyone does something imperfectly rather than everyone trying to be perfection, because there's no such thing in sustainability, because it's an evolving topic. We're just learning, we're responding, and it's really sort of there's such power in owning that narrative. I think, Emma, I really want to come to you because we're in obviously the same line of work where we get inundated with press releases from companies every single day about sustainability, and I'd love to know what your approach is and how you decipher between what's good and bad.
I think that is quite a hard one. Well, it is and it isn't really. I think quite often there are immediate red flags, like we were talking about before. Sometimes it's a brand that you know, and they are coming to you and saying, I've got this really great, amazing, sustainable thing, whatever it is, and you immediately know, no, it isn't, and you can just see right through it. Sometimes it's a brand that I might not know, and then you just kind of have to dig a little bit deeper. Quite often it's the language that they use. Sometimes you can just see right through it as well. And I think it is easier for new brands. They can kind of start from the bottom. They can take out plastic from their chain. They can pay a fair wage. They can come up with like really good incentives, take back schemes, all of these kind of things. And you can see that. Sometimes you do have to delve a bit deeper to, I don't know, look at where they're based or, whatever it is. But it's mostly around the language. And I think we were talking before as well about words. One that we were talking about was compostable. And I had an email from a brand. It was, can I name it? I won't.
Maybe, yeah.
No. I won't name it. Then I won't name it. And they had told me how they had this new pair of compostable jeans, and the whole idea obviously was insane. And I just couldn't wrap my head around it at all. And I kept emailing back saying, what about the zip? What about the metal studs? What about this? And they had no comeback to me at all. And the press release was that I could just lay my jeans out on my garden bed and they would compost. And obviously that's insane. I mean, if I didn't want my jeans anymore, I'd take them to a charity shop, or I'd donate them, or I'd resell them, or whatever, reuse, not put them in the garden. And eventually they just stopped emailing me back. And it was just so obvious that it was a nonsense, and that it was just the way I always look at it, it's jumping on a trend. Basically, it's like a brand, they are scared of falling behind, so they think, oh, what can we do? And then it's this quick reaction, knee-jerk thing, and it's quite often, I don't know if they've not bounced the idea off somebody or what, but and then they send it out and it's totally unbelievable, really. So yeah, and then the other another word we also talked about was recyclable. I feel like that word has been taken upon and used in a way that it doesn't actually mean anything anymore. It's like, this packaging is recyclable, and all that really means is I've put it in this box, I'm going to send it to you, and then when you get it, you can just put it in the recycling, and then that's it done. And that shouldn't mean that. What it should mean is that you should continue to reuse something. That's what we want to do, is reuse. It doesn't matter if it's recyclable plastic or recyclable cardboard even. It should be reused, like, more than once. So that word has, like the word sustainability, has been hijacked. I mean, sustainability doesn't really mean anything anymore because I can say anything is sustainable. Yes, last night I saw something on my Instagram and it said sustainable shirting, and you think, what on earth does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. All it is, you've just put that word in front of your product, and people see it and think, oh great, I'm going to feel good buying that product, and that just is not the case for most instances.
Yeah, I'm so glad you've raised those words specifically, because my biggest bugbear is, as a journalist, you see so many campaigns where they lead with the words compostable and recyclable. In essence, it means absolutely nothing, because it puts the power and the onus on the consumer when recycling schemes aren't in place, or, for composting it has to be in certain conditions, and it means nothing. But they hide behind these words because it makes them look better from an initial viewpoint. And to most consumers, they look at a word like that and they'll think, oh, that's great, they're doing something right. And it's just, that is, for me, is the essence of greenwashing. So how can brands be more effective in their communication?
So I'll give another example actually of a thing that was also very badly communicated. I got an email and it said Amazon and Primark are in the top most sustainable brand retailers, and obviously I thought, again, this is insane. And it was a really bad example of somebody reporting on this in a bad way. Obviously they could use their platform in a more positive way to, yes, okay, that might be the poll of what you have found. I don't know who those people were that they polled anyway, because it's all obviously rubbish, but that's by the by. I feel like they could have used that, they could have communicated it in a much better way to say, this is what we have found, and then contextualized it with the facts about these companies and the fact that they obviously have huge carbon footprints, that they produce so many products, that they are huge global brands, all of these things. And it could have been a much more useful report. And I wrote about it. I went back to them and they didn't really have much of an answer. They were like, oh, we were surprised by it as well. But I mean, you know, you're communicating, you're just adding to the greenwashing basically by saying Amazon, Primark, Nike, all of these huge brands are seen as sustainable and ethical by our consumers. And obviously they're just not. So better ways, I think, of communicating it. One brand that I think does it really well is Abel & Cole. And every time I get a press release from them or an email, they put it, it's even as simple as putting in bullet points, your information. These are obviously big topics. They are complicated. Somebody was saying earlier that carbon footprints and things are difficult topics to understand. I don't understand it all, obviously. Nobody understands everything, but breaking it down into a simple, easy to read, which sounds so basic, but it really helps to people to understand, to be able to write about it, to be able to tell other people about it, to share it on social media or whatever it is that they're doing. And quite often the things that Abel & Cole are doing, they are doing a lot about their carbon footprint and whatever, and they break it down into ways that I can understand it. I mean, I'm terrible at numbers, that's why I'm a journalist, and it makes it easier then for me to report on it. I think also Who Gives a Crap, they do it really well. They have made toilet roll, which obviously is the most mundane product ever. They've made it exciting. I write about it all the time, and actually, I mean, it was quite embarrassing, but it is just such a good brand, and they have this tongue-in-cheek tone of the way that they obviously talk to it, project their voice or whatever, and I think you have to because it's such a boring product. And they also have data on the website. Again, it's very easy to understand. It's 50% of their profits go to building toilets in areas that where people don't have safe access to toilets, which is about 2 billion people around the world. And it's just things like that that make it so much easier for people to understand. It's clear, it's also honest. And somebody else said earlier about saying, we're not there yet, but we're doing X, Y, Z to get there. And I think those things, it brings a humility. We're all human, no one's perfect. And it makes me connect with the brand easier. I understand what you're doing, where you're going. And you can talk about how far you've come. And, we used to do this. And, oh, my God, that was terrible, like somebody said. And now we do this. And it's always a learning curve. And we're always growing and increasing. And it's much better, I think, to communicate in a way like people do to each other. I'm growing, I'm still doing this, and we have a long way to go, but come with us on this journey, and you can see how far we go.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I think just touching on the data point, one thing that I've become aware of actually is to make sure that when a brand releases data, that it is independently verified, because I've had an example before where one of the main carpet recycling organisations in the UK released a report stating that they'd diverted, I think it was like an X amount of number of percentage of carpets from landfill compared to the previous year. So when I delved into it and asked about what had happened, like how they'd increased that number and things like that, what they failed to say was that actually instead of landfill, they'd just incinerated a load more. And it was a really clear example of how actually, even when it's got data attached to it, it can still be misleading. And I think it's really key to challenge brands if it's not independently verified, or if, where is that data coming from? But yeah, I mean, it would be great to kind of open up to the panel as a whole and have a bit more of a conversation, because you're dealing with communication on a daily basis. We're the ones that are scrutinizing it. But it's important to be so clear and transparent when you're releasing this information.
Can I just pick up very quickly on the recyclable and compostable thing? Sean Sutherland says recycling is the fig leaf of consumerism, because actually every time you put a piece of plastic in the world, it stays in the world. It never, ever, ever goes away. So there's no point recycling it, because it's going to be there in some form of plastic or another. Thing to do is abolish it, not recycle it. Just stop using it. And on the compostable front, when you see how hard Anya Hindmarch has worked to try and make sure her bag, the leather she's using in her bag, can really seriously be put in the compost and do the soil good. It's taken her so long, she's put so much into it, that for your jeans person, actually, we'd love to know who that brand is. I would love to know who it is. Go on, tell us. Okay, tell me after. It is bullshit, and we mustn't put up with it. And I agree. I mean, the word sustainable, we ban it now. Like ban luxury. That's another word we're not allowed to use. It's just, they're meaningless. I agree. Yeah.
Just quickly on that, I meant to mention this earlier, but on recycling, I don't know why brands don't use aluminium more, because it is almost I can't say it now.
Infinitely.
Thanks. Recyclable. 75% of all aluminium in the world still exists now, whereas a plastic bottle from Coca-Cola, you can only recycle that 2 or 3 times before it loses its properties and is no longer usable anymore. So then it will stay around for however many 100 years. It's the material that was made to last forever, but nobody thought about how to deal with it. So yeah, aluminium I think is such a good alternative that I wish that more brands would use.
Vic, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think that data is just fairly interesting, because so you often get these things of we've saved this much carbon that could plant X, or it could do this, and actually I appreciate what you said earlier, Magnus, that you need to give somebody a comparison, but some of these numbers I find infuriating, because I think it still sounds quite meaningless. And I think unless you start with where you're at, and that's the first thing when we're talking to people, is what are you doing now? Because it's great to tell me that you've increased by 20%, but where was your base?
Yeah,
where did you start from? And I think that it amazes me that someone would give you that information about carpets, and then when you question it, openly tell you that's why. When you come up with
to dig very deep.
Yeah, but when you put together these documents or these press releases, you need to have. It's not just the press release. You need to think of every single possible question someone is going to ask you about that and have an answer. Or it's just it baffles me that you would do that.
And the problem is, we're in a society now where if I don't find out, someone's going to find out.
Yeah.
So it's pointless for brands to actually. It's so much more. It doesn't make sense from a business perspective to own your journey and to really be clear about the data that you've got or you've gathered. It gives you such strength. And I wish brands would realize that, but they're either too scared to talk about it, or they just make up numbers and data out of nowhere.
It's really interesting, because when I spoke to you before this panel, you mentioned to me about communicating sustainability, and I think you said that, Charlotte, you feel that it should just be a standard. I absolutely agree with you, particularly from a luxury perspective. If I am investing a lot of money in a product that I know is made of wonderful materials, designed by the best people in the world, I absolutely want to be assured that it's been made sustainably. However, there are lots of brands that aren't in that position, and I think it is important that we communicate, because it kind of galvanizes everybody. The more we communicate about what we've done, just in our little PR agency, it's really galvanizing everybody. And so now I'm far more aware of what other people are doing. So I think if you're a huge brand, you're a luxury brand, I understand, but I think if you're average, well, not average, that's not the right word. If you're not a luxury household name, you should really be communicating everything you're doing and making it really obvious. It shouldn't have to be an adventure to go and find it.
I also, think that communicating this information is the biggest impact that you can have on an industry in terms of change, because brands are also scared to share the information because they see it as a competitive advantage. Sustainable innovation should not be seen as a competitive advantage. It should be made, we're in a crisis. We have to make this information public. what are your viewpoints on that? From a competitive, from like a competitive sort of inner
Well, I
market?
mean, I have no problem with showing the reports and people can download the reports. I think it's question is how to understand the reports, but we are underestimating the consumer all the time with taking a complex problem and then we try to communicate it in an easy way. And it doesn't really make sense, at least not for me. This is not an easy answer. And just to bridge back a bit to also when we're talking a bit regarding carbon footprint, that is about regarding the materials in the product or the production or the usage. However, how you extract the materials, that is sort of perhaps, when it comes to cables, it has copper. And to extract copper, you are removing so much other materials just to get the copper. So that is sort of what I want to build also, is that customer can choose to remove cables, unnecessary cables, when they're purchasing our products, and then their price will go down also. I mean, we need to nudge people, and also not everyone are believing in sustainability or that the global climate change, and how do we nudge those people in making the right decision? So yeah, it's I'm not sure if that's answering the question,
but it is about education as well, isn't it? It's educating your audience.
It is, exactly, but you can do it in different ways also. Some people don't need, they do understand already we have a problem in the world regarding climate change. Do we need to educate them, or is the other ones? I don't know. But you can do it in different ways, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there's an interplay here that we have to realize, and we have to look at sustainability holistically. I'm sorry for all the corporate buzzwords, but I'm going to explain in a minute. For us, I like brand bashing as much as the next guy, but we have to realize that brands are looking at sustainability as a competitive advantage, even though maybe it shouldn't be, but that's the reality on the ground. When we sell a pod, we will get the question of, how sustainable is it? I want the most sustainable pod. So it is something where we, luckily, for us at least, can realize that this is a competitive advantage, and we can tailor our business towards that. But that also means that we have to rely on you guys in the media and on regulators. I mean, you're obviously out of the EU now, but still the EU is considering legislating on greenwashing. I think that's a really good thing, and that doesn't hurt us brands. It hurts some brands, but it helps the brands that are responsible. So there's an interplay between media, between lawmakers, and between brands, and that's very important to recognize. And then someone was saying something quite important about authenticity, I think, or being honest, or being recognizing your faults. I think we should also allow for that. For instance, in our last sustainability report, we end with "there's much more we can do," and that's really important when it comes to authenticity, because I think that's one of the key ingredients in effective communication. I usually compare it to a job interview. If you ask me what are your development areas, and I say, well, I work so hard I forget to cast a paycheck, right? Then you're not going to really believe the rest of the things I'll be saying in that job interview. So if I'm vulnerable, if I admit where I need to go, if I am transparent with my development areas as a brand, the rest of my sustainability communications will be so much more impactful, and they will be believed by my target audience.
I like that, brands being more vulnerable. I think that's a good...
No, spot on, because the point is, it is a competitive advantage to be sustainable, and consumers are voting with their wallets. They do want sustainable brands. But what I think is interesting is it's not a matter of brands over-communicating. It was when I started with Great British Brand Zero, it was a question of brands not wanting to communicate because they were so scared of not being bought because they weren't doing things right. And they were scared to admit that they had a long journey ahead of them. And I think what's so exciting is that is changing, because all brands are saying, like you are, we've still got a long way to go. And that's the best thing a brand can do, and the best thing we can do, I think, as journalists and people doing magazines and doing lots of stuff around it, is to encourage brands to be. And you use the word transparency. That is the key thing. Mm-hmm. Just keep the conversation going, because everyone's in it together. no one is perfect, and we just all got to carry on.
Amazing. I think that's a great sort of roundup. Transparency is key. We're part of a collective community, and there are simple ways that we can effectively communicate. But I'd love to open it up to the audience. I'm sure you're all bursting with questions, and now is the time to fire away and ask this wonderful panel anything you would like. Yeah?
I know you guys do coffee pod machines using Lavazza pods.
Yes, we only have one, which we currently do with Lavazza. Yes, you're very correct.
And which is unusual in the marketplace because actually the pods are biocompostable, as I understand it.
Yes.
Many other brands, the majority of other brands, produce pods which are a combination of plastic and aluminium, which is virtually impossible to recycle, and they kind of give themselves a salve by setting up recycling schemes so that consumers who use these pods can send them back to be recycled. When they actually send them back, they're not getting recycled, they're getting incinerated or putting into landfill. What do you feel about manufacturers not, and also the other aspect of that is that many consumers, once they start out with good intentions, start using those schemes and then realize it's completely impractical. The couriers are never arriving on time. You can't give it into the courier drop shop. So the good intentions all fall away. How do you think that brands that are invested in those kind of products should be a little bit more honest about the long-term effects of what they're doing and how they're seeking to address the negative aspects?
So I think pod machines, let's take it back probably 3 years, maybe a little bit further than that. Pod machines were very popular. Probably everyone, well not everyone, but a high percentage of people had them in their homes because they saw them as being convenient, and the environmental aspects weren't really highlighted or a key aspect of that because they were still growing within the market. We obviously do only have one, and that's the only model that we have. But the rest of the models that we have, we try and focus on our being